Let me share.
All right, I'm going to introduce you first, Stormy, and then you can share, and if you want to do a little introduction as well. But um, so Stormy has been doing our sole transaction coordinating work on Cityside Properties Group now. Oh shoot, really since I think the beginning of the year. Went kind of full time doing that aspect of things. She's way more than a transaction coordinator to us. She's more like an executive assistant, whatever. I mean, like we go to her with all the questions. She dove headfirst in all this NAR settlement stuff, new forms, new documents, broker questions. Anytime we have anything, she hops into the broker stateroom, waits on there and talks to them. So she's definitely more informed than probably myself or Jeff or anything also. So should be a really, really good training here. And so Stormy, I'm gonna let you take it away.
All right. Good morning. I'm Stormy Bass. I work with CSP as well as several actually EXP agents to do their transaction work. I have, I think, around 20 agents at this point. So we do a lot of transactions. It's been a lot of fun and a lot of changes with the NAR settlement. So yes, I have talked to the broker probably more times than I can count. I've asked a lot of questions. I've totally deep dived into it. So with working with so many agents, it really gives me different scenarios that are, coming into play. So we've asked a lot of the questions and kind of gotten down to the details on all the documents that we can so far. So I will give you all the knowledge that I have so far. Things may change, of course, in the next 30, 60, 90 days. I will say that the brokers are really easy to talk to at EXP. So if you do have questions, just make sure you're hopping in and asking those questions. They have a broker hotline number as well that you can reach out to. So they're easy to access and ask questions. If you do have those questions, I would suggest find out the right way to do something before you move forward with it. So anyway, let me share my screen. I haven't done the Zoom in a while, so bear with me.
Are you co-host?
This one, yeah. Okay. My stuff around. All right, let's do it. Okay, so let's talk post NAR settlement documents. So there are three big takeaways, I would say, with the NAR settlement. EXP is no longer sharing compensation. It's probably been tossed around a lot that EXP is not paying broker to broker. A broker brought it up to me that I would avoid saying that, and I agree with the broker because it almost comes across as if EXP is not willing to pay other agents, and that's the last thing that we want any agents to think is that if if your client's interested in a listing that's with EXP, that we're not paying buyer's agents. So try to use this phrase. EXP is no longer sharing compensation, but they are absolutely still paying buyer's agents. It will be between the seller and the buyer's broker or the buyer agent. It just will not be between broker and broker. You also can no longer advertise buyer agent commission on the MLS. I'm pretty sure everyone's been updated on that one already because you've seen the boxes disappear. There is an option for seller concession. That's going to go to the buyer, not the buyer agent necessarily. So we'll get into that a little later. But yes, you can no longer advertise on the MLS. You can also not advertise buyer agent compensation with any third-party companies that are associated with the MLS. So think about Showing Time, Showing Smart, Broker Bay. If you're in the Dallas area, that's their showing service, or even Supra. So no communication about buyer agent compensation on the MLS or any of those third-party companies as well. And then lastly, you do need disclosure of compensation before opening any doors. So make sure you're getting those buyer reps signed. I think everyone has been a little lax with the buyer rep in the past. I know a lot of my agents do, but it's pretty much across the board. Everyone kind of has been lax about showing homes and then getting that buyer rep signed after the fact when you're sending offers and things like that. That's kind of a thing of the past now. So make sure you are getting that signed prior to showing any homes. Okay, so the seller can agree to offer compensation. With EXP specifically, other brokers are still doing broker-to-broker compensation, and that's okay. EXP is not. They are not commingling. They're not sharing compensation. So with EXP, it just has to be paid from the seller directly to the buyer through seller concessions, which don't love this option, and we'll talk about it, or directly to the buyer's broker. This is really going to be your go-to option. I'm going to split it up between the listing side and the buy side to just kind of make this clean. And also, I don't want to dive into all this and then you have questions. So I'll stop on some of these pages and I guess open it up and see if anyone has questions. And if you do, we'll stop and kind of go over it and then we can move along. So on the list side, everyone's familiar with the residential exclusive right to sell. This is the TXR 1101 form. Moving forward, this document is only going to state the listing agent's compensation. It cannot state anything about the buyer's agent compensation. So for EXP specifically, you will no longer use the 5A box. Don't use anything in the 5A box. It has to be 5B. Within 5B, it has to be a definitive amount. It cannot be up to, it cannot be 2 to 4%, it cannot be 2,000 to 5,000. It cannot be a range. Okay. And with that being said, you want to, I'm thinking about new constructions. If you end up putting, say, 3%, for example, on this document, and a new construction property is willing to pay 4%, you will need to get this amended. You will have to amend up. You do not have to amend down. So if you write 3% on here and then it ends up being, oh, yes.
Real quick, sorry. This is just the listing agreement, right? We're not on the buyer's agreement
Oh,
yet.
I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. No worries. No worries.
Still, though, you would have to amend up or down. So if you probably really won't negotiate higher with a listing, but just know across the board, all documents. Yeah, you're right. I'm talking about buyer's rep. Just know about across the board, you would have to amend up versus down. I'm sorry, you're right though. So for listing agreements, it is only the listing agent's compensation, nothing about buyer's agent compensation on this one. Any questions on this document? No?
Remember 5B. 5B.
5B.
That is the
Always
specific
5B.
reason. Yep.
Okay, so on that exclusive right to sell, so same document that we were just looking at, underneath that 5B box, there is this box. It's the authorization to disclose seller paying buyer's expenses. Most likely, you're always going to check seller does authorize broker to disclose. This doesn't necessarily mean you need to disclose a set amount. This just says if someone calls you and is saying, hey, is your seller offering buyer agent compensation? In order for you to have that conversation and even just say, yes, my seller's motivated, they are offering compensation, you need to have this document signed. So most likely all of you are going to check seller does authorize broker to disclose, which means you have an additional form you need to send with that listing agreement. Okay, so it's TXR 1412. This is what it looks like. This is not contractually bounding for the seller. It is just, like I said, giving you, can y'all hear me? I'm getting different notifications.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So this is not going to, it states right here, seller is not obligated to pay this amount or any other amount unless seller agrees to such payment in a sales contract. So this is just giving you the right to communicate with the buyer's agent. My seller is willing to pay a buyer agent compensation. It's negotiable. Please submit with the offer. Or my seller is happy to pay 2%, or you can be as specific as you want. I suggest not. I suggest have them submit it with the offer. But this document you will get signed by the seller. And what I've been doing in the top box, I won't put an amount. I would use a blanket statement down below B, something such as a seller is open to contributing up to 2% towards buyer broker compensation with an acceptable offer. So you're really not boxing them in. Again, this isn't going to, they're not obligated to pay that amount, but more of a blanket statement is going to probably make that seller feel a little more comfortable because everything's negotiable now. They want to see what the offer looks like as well as what the buyer agent is requesting in compensation, and look at the whole picture and kind of go from there. So I wrote out a little script of kind of how that conversation can go. So if you're talking to a buyer's agent, you could say something like, "Hi, Sarah, my seller is a motivated seller and he's happy to pay buyer broker compensation with an acceptable offer. Everything is negotiable and my seller has asked to see the offer with your request for compensation to see the full picture. Please submit your offer and I look forward to working with you to get this property executed for our clients." So something,
That's great.
blanket statement like that.
Is that on the, oh, I'm looking at it. I was going to copy that. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're really, I would say, as Mikey would say, actually, pick up the phone or have this conversation over the phone because everyone is new to this situation and concerned. No one wants to work for free, right? Everyone wants to make sure that the homes that they're showing, the seller's offering that compensation if their buyer can't pay their compensation. So I would say have these conversations over the phone, making sure you're kind and considerate to that buyer's agent, letting them know, hey, my seller is motivated, but they just want to see it in writing. They want to see what you're offering. Because let's say, for instance, you submit an offer on someone's home and you're asking 100K off the list price or something crazy, but you still want a full 3%, likely not going to happen, right? So this is just a way of saying it nicely over the phone. It's all negotiable now, but I would have that conversation so they're more motivated to go show the home versus maybe a short kind of, a text can get hard. I think that's what I'm trying to say is it can be misconstrued, misrepresented over text. Yeah, they're offering, please go show. You want to just come across a little more kind and explain the process, explain, that your seller just wants to see it on paper. But yes, absolutely. I have a motivated seller. They absolutely want to pay a buyer's agent. Please show the home. Please submit what you would like to receive in compensation. And let's go from there. Let's get this deal done kind of thing.
Hey, Stormy, real quick, do you have in this slide, and sorry, I don't know, how like what Jeff was running into where you have agents arguing with you back and forth about proper documentation that you should send over? Do you have anything in this slide about that, or can I talk about that for a second?
Go for it.
Okay, so Jeff was running into an issue where pretty much any agent that was not with EXP was saying, hey, we need this agreement between brokers, agreement signed. We need this signed. We need this. And Jeff was getting really frustrated. You, the guys that know Jeff, he hates wasting time, and it was a big waste of time. That's what it was. So essentially, there's only one document that we need from these other agencies, and it's the 2406. And they are going to put in their D2B. So it's D2B says the seller is going to pay a specific percentage to the buyer broker. That is the specific and only document that other agencies need to send us. We will not accept or sign an agreement between brokers or anything else.
And I have a slide for this. I'll show you the visual
you do?
of
Okay.
it as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so I was going to add
sure.
that. I was going to add that to this text where it says, "Hi, Sarah, my seller's motivated." Maybe at the bottom, I'll say, "This is the only form I need," because unfortunately, other brokers are teaching their agents they need that document signed before they even go show the property. And that's just not true. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, no.
Frustrating, but
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm having a listing, and I have some agents already calling me saying, "Hey, is that true that EXP is not paying any contribution?" So I don't know how to expose this information. I know in the MLS we are not able, but is there any way that they know my client is willing to contribute the 3% to the buyer's broker, but these people is kind of afraid of showing the property, and 2 of them already called me. They don't know if to show it or not because they're unsure if EXP is paying.
Sure. I would say this may be like the pain point of this whole situation is you're gonna have to take these phone calls. You're gonna have to pick up the phone and have more conversations because you can't put any blanket statements on the MLS or anywhere. But this is where I'm saying pick up the phone, reassure that agent, hey, absolutely. And if you can understand what EXP is doing so that you can explain it, it makes more sense. So if you can explain, hey, EXP absolutely is paying buyer agent compensation on their listings. Please
hang
don't
on real quick.
misunderstand.
Stormy, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you because I just want to
That's
make
okay.
sure we're all proper on this. So EXP is not paying, right? Keep that in mind. We're not doing broker to broker compensation, but our seller is willing to pay a buyer broker compensation. So we need to make sure we're correct with our verbiage here. And that's what 2406 is. So I don't know who exactly was speaking there, but what you would say to those agents and what I've been saying to those agents that are reaching out on my listings is you would say specifically, hey, I'm a professional agent. I'm on your side as well. I'm going to be a buyer's agent. I've already discussed this with my seller. My seller has agreed that he is going to offer your compensation. Now, again, we need the 2406 to show exactly what you're asking for. If you want 3%, send it with your offer. And so when you send it over there, we can present it over. But, and I've been telling these to my clients, as long as you've spoken to your seller about this and it's okay, I've been saying, as long as the offer is reasonable, he is going to be reasonable as well, and he's going to pay a full 3% as well. So it's like that is the case. But we need to make sure we do not say EXP will pay, because there's no more of that.
That's true. So EXP is not sharing compensation. That's what it comes back to. However, my seller absolutely is willing to pay compensation to a buyer's agent. With EXP, the compensation is between the seller and the buyer's broker versus EXP and another broker. So it just changes who the compensation is between. It's not between broker to broker, it's between seller and that broker.
So a title company.
Does that help clarify it?
The title just credit the money from the seller. They collect the money from the seller funds to pay the broker directly, right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think that's the biggest takeaway is you're going to have to pick up the phone until this kind of becomes the normal and everyone understands, like Mike said, EXP is not paying, but the seller that listed with EXP is still paying compensation. So picking up that phone and saying, absolutely, my seller is paying compensation. Please, show the home, send it with your offer, what you're requesting for compensation. We would love to make this deal work and move forward.
And make it easy. Keep this in mind, guys. Just make it super easy. As listing agents, we are all having conversations with our sellers about the benefits of continuing to offer a buyer broker compensation with any offers, with any listings. And to be honest with you, if you're not doing that, then you need to get with one of your mentors or one of the leaders here of the team and ask them how they're going about it, because my listing presentation has not changed at all. All of my listings are paying full broker compensation on the buyer side, and they're completely okay with that because they understand the benefit of that. And there's a lot of negatives associated if they don't do that. So anyway, yeah, make sure you have the conversation, and that's going to make these conversations with these other agents easier.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions right now?
Do you think is that a good idea to type it on the MLS in the part that says concessions? You say 3%, that's all?
So you can put a percentage. I think HAR is set up for a dollar amount. And I would not suggest it, and I'll tell you why. Or if anything, at the very least, I really wouldn't suggest this either, but you could put, a broker told me this, and I was like, okay, you could put $1 saying my seller is willing, like just a blanket statement of we are looking to pay, the seller is motivated and willing to pay buyer agent compensation. But there's two ways buyer agents can get paid. It's through seller concession, which seller concession is to the buyer. And then in turn, the buyer needs to pay the buyer's agent, or they can get paid to from the seller to the buyer broker directly, who then pays the agent. So if you're paying into a seller's concession, if the seller is paying a seller's concession, sorry, That goes to the buyer. Okay. And then the buyer has to turn around and pay the buyer's agent. There's a lot that could come up within a transaction where they may need funds. And technically, these funds are for the buyer. And they may decide they want to take those funds if there's more repairs than they expected. If they don't have the funds to pay for a survey or whatever it may be, things can come up within a transaction where they throughout the transaction up and decide they need some of those funds. So it's almost like kind of co-mingle there. So I really wouldn't recommend doing the seller's concession route. We want to make sure that that buyer's agent can get paid for their services. It's much better to just go the buyer broker compensation route. EXP has blatantly said they will not be legally going after buyers that get to the table at closing and do not pay a buyer's agent. It doesn't make sense for them to pay for legal fees to go for, say, a $2,000 buyer's agent commission. The fees and all of that to take someone to court is not going to add up in their favor, so they're not going to do it. So they're just straight recommending that agents try for the buyer broker compensation route and not the seller concession route. So all of my agents that I've been working with, we're not listing anything under seller concessions on the MLS. It's just having that phone conversation of, yes, my seller is motivated and willing to pay for buyer broker compensation. Please submit that form 2406 and let me know what you are requesting, and we'll have that conversation and go from there.
Good info here, Stormy.
That makes sense.
I'm gonna copy and paste a message and it's just a generic message I've been sending every one of these agents that are asking me about compensation in the chat here in just a second. I have not gotten any pushback at all on this, just so you can see how easy it is when someone says, hey, are you offering compensation? But just to reiterate, I would not recommend putting it on the concessions. It could get really messy really quickly.
Yeah, don't put yourself in that position if you're and talk to your talk to your seller about it as well, and just I would avoid it.
Stormy, I have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, the difference between offering a seller offering seller concessions versus the 2406, the way that is recommended, is the difference really in terms of a listing marking it on the MLS to show that the seller concessions are available? Or is there another document that we should be looking for, even though we're not going to be doing that? Is there something that we should be looking for?
I don't think I understand. Say it one more time.
Sorry, like the difference between using a 2406, which is the recommended route, versus the seller concession route. I guess, is there a document that we should be looking out for that shows the seller concession so we know to avoid it? If that makes it easier to understand.
I do not think there's a document. I think you would just see it on the MLS if there's a seller's concession, and then I would just reconfirm. I would again pick up the phone and reconfirm, hey, I see this is listed on the MLS with 6,000 seller concession. Is that what your seller's offering? And I would still try to, that's a good question. I haven't talked to the broker about that. I would see if you could still try to submit, like if you're representing the buyer, submit that 2406 form and receive the funds through buyer broker compensation versus the seller concession. Even though they've listed it like that, I would still try to do it the other way. I would assume that it's still negotiable. I would actually have to ask the broker just to verify that, but I would still try to switch it to the other.
On the buyer's tenant rep agreement, if you have a specific listing that they want to make an offer on that says they're going to contribute to the buyer's broker, and then you can get your commission that way, I think you would just, the document I think you're referring to or looking for, you would just revise your buyer tenant rep agreement to that, right, Mikey? To match.
As long as it's, well, if your buyer rep agreement says 3%, and let's say they're only offering $7,326 in concessions and it's below 3%, you don't have to revise it. You can, because it's below the 3%. If it's above the 3%, that's the only time when you have to amend it. Because EXP was before and is still, like, if we have 3% on our buyer's agreement and the seller's only paying 2%, most of us are not going to go after our buyer for the extra percent. We're going to say, hey, thank you for the 2%. send me a referral, whatever. So as long as it's below the amount that's on your buyer's rep agreement, you're fine. You don't have to amend it.
Any other questions on seller concession? I would just avoid this situation. You don't want it to get messy and have a lot of unknowns kind of floating around as you're proceeding through the transaction before you get to the closing table. So just try to stick with buyer broker compensation on that 2406. Okay. Let's switch to the buy side, even though we've talked about it a little bit. So this is an option. If you have a buyer that comes to you and says, I cannot afford to pay your compensation, I don't want to pay your compensation, however that conversation goes, please only show me homes where the seller is paying buyer broker compensation. You just need to get it in writing. This is totally legal. You can absolutely pick up the phone and say, hey, is your seller offering compensation? No. Okay. Unfortunately, my buyer doesn't have the funds to pay me as a buyer's agent, and the buyer has instructed me not to show them any homes that the seller is not offering compensation. So this is something that can be done. Just make sure you get it in writing. It can be an email, it can be a text, whatever it is, save it somewhere so that you have that. But this is an option if you have a buyer that just can't afford or just refuses to pay buyer agent compensation.
And that way, it's not steering or anything like that either, because what some agents could possibly do is like, oh, well, if you're not paying my commission, I'm not showing you. And that directly is steering away. What the conversation would be if you have it in writing is, oh man, that's unfortunate. My buyers actually advised me not to show them any houses that are not compensating for the buyer broker. So unfortunately, we won't be able to see it. And so that's how you always want to acknowledge that, because this will come up, especially for like our FHA buyers putting minimal down. They don't have a lot of extra in funds. This will come up for sure. So just make sure when you're giving this information about these properties that you always say, well, hey, the buyer has advised me this.
And hopefully this is a rare occurrence. Hopefully, agents out there that are taking on listings or having these in-depth conversations with their seller that, hey, we want to motivate someone to come, show your property. A lot of buyers still need assistance. They can't afford to pay buyer's agent compensation, and even more scripts that Mikey can get into on that. But yeah, hopefully that listing agents are having these conversations with sellers, so sellers are still offering buyer agent compensation, and this is kind of a rare situation that you'll run into.
Real quick, Stormy, Charlene did
Sure.
put in the chat, and this is true. I would actually get this on the buyer's rep as well. You could have it in an email or text or whatever, but just put it in special provisions under your buyer's rep and you're covered.
So the buyer's rep, the way it was explained to me from a broker, the buyer's rep versus the 1-4, those special provisions are so different. And the 1-4, it's very specific what you can put in special provisions and what you cannot. There's a lot of things you cannot put in the 1-4 contract under special provisions, but your buyer rep is completely different. It's wide open to put any information that you feel is necessary under that special provision. So yeah, that's a great point. You absolutely can put it in the buyer's rep. And then they've signed on it as well. So double protection. Okay, so you must get the buyer rep signed prior to opening any doors. I don't know if anyone's seen the update from HAR or any other, I don't know if any other MLSs are doing it, but likely so. The MLS is going to be policing whether these buyers reps are being signed prior to opening doors. So if they receive a complaint from you as an agent, they can request that you send them proof that you have a buyer's rep signed prior to opening that door. And if you cannot provide that proof within 2 days, it's an automatic $500 fine. There's no warnings. It's just straight to a $500 fine. If they fine you multiple times, I think it said, it'll escalate. They can suspend your MLS. So they are not playing around with it. I would absolutely make sure you're getting these signed prior to opening any doors. And just have this conversation with that buyer prior to sending it. This is across the board. Every agent's going to have to do this. Gone are the days where an agent's like, I want to see the house now, and you're trying to send a buyer rep and they're like, no, I'm not signing this. I'll just go to the next agent. they're going to come across this with every single agent. So just take the time to explain the new situation to the buyer, and go ahead and get this form sent over, have them sign it, and then you can move forward. There is a single door buyer rep that you can have signed. I want to say it's an EXP form, so it will be under SkySlope Forms. My recommendation, just go ahead and send them, like, have that conversation with this buyer about like what they're looking for, explain the situation, but I would suggest just go ahead and get a full buyer's representation agreement signed. That's for a month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may be, versus the single, so that you've already got that in place and you're not having to go back and send them more buyer's reps for each door. It's just going to save you time and energy, and kind of solidify that this is a good working relationship. I'm agreeing to work with you for this amount of time, and you're agreeing to work with me. So it's kind of going to benefit you as an agent just to go, as long as they're open to it. I would push for the full buyer representation over the single forms, so you're not creating more work for yourself in the long run, I guess is how I should say it.
Real quick, Stormy.
Any questions? Sure.
Yeah. So just so I can, I guess, come on that as well. So in our script practice and what we do, what we train our, or how we train our team, in my opinion, it's still going to get people, it's still going to be possibly more difficult to have and get someone to sign a long form, 5-page document for 3 months or whatever, just based off one phone call. And so if that is the issue you're trying to discuss and they're just not doing it, the short form is okay, or the EXP form that is like the touring agreement form, because essentially what you're doing just like what you did before, except they have to sign this, right? But they're signing it just for you to show them that one house or these 2 houses or whatever. And then you try to earn their business and their sole business when you're there. You go over your buyer's pitch, your buyer's presentation, you go over all of those things, and that way they would be more willing to sign a long form for whatever, 3 months, 6 months or whatnot. So if they are hesitant about the long form up front, be okay and be fluid with this. We're okay, let's just do the short form. I'll show you these 2 houses, and then I'll go over my buyer's presentation with you guys whenever we get there, so you can kind of see exactly how I'm going to help you out and what this entails and everything like that. So, just be, I'm looking for the right word, but just be open to that, because that's probably going to happen as well.
It's a good example. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, because
so
then
I
you
have a
meet them.
question. Hello,
Hi.
you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question. So it means you mentioned we can use touring agreement for the first few house in order to do the long form. Is that correct?
So you can have a touring agreement or even use the short form buyer's rep, because there's technically on the short form, there's a section in there for tour, like just showing, basically you're a showing assistant at that point, but you're not fully representing them. You can do that in order to show them the house, get to the house, and then earn their business at that point to get that long form signed. So you could absolutely do that, but you have to have one of those forms signed prior to showing the house. So you'd have to have the short form, the short form buyer's rep, which technically there's a showing portion in there, or the touring agreement. You would have to have one of those signed prior to getting there. The whole goal would be to get there, show your value, so they would sign a long form buyer's rep agreement with you for 6 months or 8 months, however long it's going to take to get them into a home.
So at the end of the road, you still have to have the buyer long form in order to get the long.
Technically, you could do the short form. There is a section in there that states the exact, basically, hey, we're going to get 3%, all that stuff. You could do the short form. The broker is recommending to do the long form though, because it's the most protected for you. EXP has actually came out with their agreement as well, so they're actually okay with their agreements as well. But for Texas, again, I know there's people out of state here. Check with your local broker. The TXR long form is the one form that covers us as agents the best, even over EXPs currently. that's actually coming from a broker. So they're okay with if you use the EXP one. They're okay if you use the long form one. They would prefer you to use one of those over the short form. But technically, you could use the short form as long as you have the percentage that you're making and it shows that you're representing. Because there's two check boxes. You would actually have to check the one that you're representing the buyer and the buyer sign that one. So you would have to have something showing that you represent them to actually make offers and things.
Yeah, so all three are technically acceptable. There's an EXP one, there's a Texas Realtor short form, and a Texas Realtor long form. There are three options. So all three are acceptable. But yeah, the broker is recommending the long form. I think they're working on the EXP one to be a little more specific and to cover the agent. But yes, technically all three are accepted. Any other questions? Okay. All right, the one document that everyone needs to know about. This is the addendum regarding broker's fees. It is a Texas Realtor Form 2406. And this is what you're going to send with offers when you're asking for a seller to pay buyer broker compensation. So all listings with EXP only will accept this form. They will reject everything else. They will only accept it if you use D2B. That is the only option with EXP. They'll reject everything else. You'll have to have it amended. Okay, so D2B with EXP says the payment is between the seller and the buyer's broker. Okay, so EXP is not broker to broker. Remember, they're between seller and buyer broker. So you will always choose, if the listing is with EXP, you will always choose D2B. What you are going to run into, and agents are already running into, every other broker is paying broker to broker. I think everyone I've seen so far. You may fill this out D2B, and that agent may come back to you and say, no, you need to use option one, D1. That is something that is acceptable if they have the listing at a different broker. Okay, so D1 says it's making the payment transaction is between the listing broker and the buyer's broker. So you would just use.
Sorry, Stormy.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
So I was going to say, this is where it kind of gets confusing because you're like, hold on, wait, on this side, we're doing this. And on this side, we're doing this. That's why I want you guys taking notes on the listing side. If it's our listing, it's 2406, this form, D2B, no matter what, it doesn't matter. I don't care what that other agent says. This is the form that you're going to send. If you want to get paid, no other form will be signed. On the buyer side, though, we still try to get this one signed by them. But what D2B actually states is that the seller is going into another agreement with the buyer broker. So technically, if their listing agreement, they used 5A and not 5B like we do, 5A states, hey, they're going to be okay with 6%. And then we add 3% on D2B. That's technically 9% total that the seller's agreeing to. And so because it's a different agreement outside of the listing agreement. So that is the reason why EXP is saying, hey, because other brokers are still doing 5A, still sharing compensation, we are going to be okay doing D1 to where the listing broker would share the compensation just like it used to be. So I want to make sure this is only on the buy side, only if that other broker used 5A and is sharing compensation still. So this will happen again. It'll be a conversation that needs to be had with that agent, but we just have to educate ourselves and understand the difference between the listing side and the buyer side. Anyway, keep going, Stormy.
Yeah, so if you are sending an offer to another agent, you can have this conversation on the phone with them prior, but more than likely they're going to request that you use D1. So you'll put your percentage there. And D1 also specifies that you need to fill out the form TXR 2402. That is the compensation agreement between brokers. So if you're sending an offer to an agent outside of EXP, a listing outside of EXP, know that you're likely going to need to send this form as well as the 2402. Also, just a side note, anyone out there doing paperwork themselves, EXP gets paid out of Travis County. So any EXP documents, don't put Harris. I know we're in Houston, or any other counties. You're always going to put Travis because that's where EXP's, I guess, headquarters or payment department is. Travis is the only acceptable county. Just a side note.
Can we go back before we get too much further? He said
Sure.
if the other broker used the listing, did he say 5A on their listing agreement? Then
Yeah,
we
I'll
would
show
use...
you real quick. So this right here, 5A, what we used to do is 5A 1A. You used to put the full compensation here for the listing side and the buy side. So 6% was common, 3% going to the listing agent, 3% going to the buyer's agent. So other brokers are still using this. So what he's saying is their document says 6%. And then if you come over here and fill out this one and do D2B and put 3%, this is separate. This is not linked to that listing agreement. So that's basically saying the seller is paying a total of 9%. Because you're putting 3% here. He's already agreed, she has already agreed to 3% on the listing side, and then an additional 3% to the buyer on that listing agreement. Does that make sense?
It does. I just have a question because I have an agent I'm the listing agent selling the house to another EXP agent, and she's still wanting me to sign that 2402, and she won't sign D2B. So I don't know.
She's with EXP?
Yeah, and we have the same broker, but we're in different locations, but we still have the same broker. So
yeah, I would ask her to go have that conversation with her broker, maybe if she's still confused, because you can say, I've talked to my EXP broker and this is what's required. I guess if there's questions, can you hop in, to the broker room and ask to clarify, but this is what EXP is requiring is D2B. So if she does it on D1 and then you submit it in SkySlope under your transaction file, they're going to reject it. They're going to tell you it's incorrect. They're going to tell you that this needs to be corrected.
yeah, well, I didn't sign D1. I sent it back and I explained it to her. So, and now we don't have one signed at all. So I don't know what happens in that case.
Yeah, I would just keep working with her to get it signed. It is messy and confusing. I have seen this document come across like 3 or 4 times already in the last 10 days incorrect. So you're not the only one out there going through this. Don't feel like you're alone in this. It's just confusing because brokers are doing different things. And eventually everyone's going to understand, okay, EXP is doing it this way. Other brokers are doing it this way. Or EXP thinks that other brokers are going to get on board. This just limits liability to EXP. That's why they're doing this. They're not commingling compensations anymore, just to keep everything kind of separate and clean. And EXP anticipates that other brokers are going to move to this if we start seeing lawsuits and whatnot. So we'll see. I think a lot of things may change in the next 30, 60, 90 days. But you're just going to have to keep having those conversations and kind of work through it.
And I apologize to ask this question again, because I know you went over it, but I'm still kind of not clear with it. You said if we're showing a property for another broker, we would still use 2042.
If you're writing an offer for a listing that's with another broker, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would have that conversation, but typically they're going to request that you use D1.
Right, but do we still, because you said we don't use 2402 on EXP listings, but we do use it on listings that are not our brokerage?
Right, so if you look on this document, and this will it'll state on the document, so that'll help clarify anytime you go through this. D2 does not say anything about needing 2402, but if you look at D1 towards the end, it says
thank
sales,
you.
Yeah, TXR 2402. Yeah, it's okay. No, you're totally fine.
I don't have the form in front of me, and I'm trying to look at it on my phone. It's so tiny I can't see it.
Oh, no problem. You're totally fine. Yeah, so D2 specifically states that you will also need TXR 2402, which is a compensation agreement between brokers
Got it.
because it's broker to broker. Whereas D2 is between seller and broker. So you don't need a broker to broker compensation on that one.
Just
Thank
to
you so much.
You're welcome.
Just to summarize and clarify, if we're sending an offer to another agent that is with another broker, we use the 2406 plus the 2402, right?
You're going to use both.
Both. If we send an offer to
Mhm.
an agent from another broker. But if we
For
are
another broker.
listing our own listings, we only use the 2406, right? That's the only one we use.
Yeah, with EXP, you just need the 2406.
And D2B.
With any other broker, you likely need both 2406 and 2402,
Got it. Okay.
unless things change. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, can you just, I'm sorry, I'm confused about, I didn't realize if you are interested in buying or making an offer for a listing with another broker, you need 2402 and 2406. I thought, why is it both? Explain why it's both.
So if you're sending an offer on a listing and that listing is with a different broker,
Right?
they have different brokers are paying broker to broker. EXP is not. So if that's the case, you're going to use, when you send your 1-to-4 contract, you're going to send this document, which is 2406, and you're going to select D1, which is between listing broker and another broker. Put your 3% there. And then right underneath it says you're also required to send the TXR 2402, which is an agreement between brokers. So if you're ever sending an offer to an agent that has a listing outside of EXP, you have to send 2 documents. This one, the 2406, and the 2402, which is an agreement between brokers. That makes sense.
Yeah.
This is what's tripping everyone up.
Yeah.
Do not feel like you're the only one confused. I'm telling you, we have made edits on these documents several times and had to have conversations because they're being told one thing by their broker and they're just trying to follow the rules and do what's
Right.
correct. And we're over here saying, oh, no, we're supposed to be doing this. So we're all, I think, kind of learning as we go. And it's muddy, but it's going to get better, I think, the more transactions you come across.
But
think
if we are only listing our own listing, we just need the regular listing agreement plus the 2406. That's all, right?
So you actually, if it's your listing, you need the listing agreement. This is for the buyer's agent compensation. So you're not going to fill this out. You're going to, if it's your listing, you're going to receive this document along with the 1-to-4 contract. So when they send you an offer to purchase your listing, they're going to send this document as well, asking for your seller to pay buyer broker compensation.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what this document is.
Got it. So I will receive this document. I just have to make sure this document says D2.
Yes, there you go. D2B.
So if the offering agent is not from EXP, they'll want to be checking D1.
So it's whoever has the listing. If the
Whoever.
listing is at EXP, when that's what dictates where you go D1 or D2. If the listing is with EXP, it will always be D2B, always.
Okay.
If it's a listing with any other broker, it will be D1, most likely, unless they change. Start to change.
Can I
things.
chime in real quick too,
That's
Stormy?
what I'm running into. Yep.
So, the way I always look at this, remember what 5B says and what EXP is saying, hey, all EXP agents were doing 5B, which states that, hey, Michael Bass is listing this property and I'm charging 3% commission from my seller. That's 5B. So there's a 3% listing agreement. This right here, the 2406 that she has pulled up under D2B, that is the other 3% that the seller is going to pay the buyer's agent. And so that's how you always look at it. You would only use this with like a listing agent that has chosen 5B. All of the listing brokers that share compensation still, it's always going to be D1. And so it's like when you start looking at it and you really start just putting, like, you have to put that in your mind. Stormy's right. It was really confusing at first. We hopped into the broker stateroom so many
Everyone's
times
confused.
to get clarity on this. Finally, we got it because we've done so many trainings and everything like that. But don't feel, don't feel any type of way. It's kind of frustrating at first. It's new, but once you get it, it's there. It is what it is.
Then we have to train the other brokers to, if they want to make an offer on an EXP listing, they have to do it differently than they're doing any other listing.
Right. And that's where I would just pick up that phone and say, hey, I know this is confusing. I know it's new for everyone. Because the listing is with EXP does not share compensation. So we need to select D2 on this form because D2 says that the compensation transaction, the way it moves, the money moves, is between the seller and the broker. It is not between broker and broker. Other brokers are doing broker to broker. EXP is cutting themselves out of it between the seller and the broker.
And if you look up in the chat a little bit, I actually copied and pasted, and this exact message I've sent multiple buyer's agents on different listings of mine. I haven't gotten pushback once because it states in there the reason why they're having to use 2406 and everything. And I'm not being rude or anything about it. It's just super like nice and straight to the point. So you can copy this and just like save it, because that's all I've been doing for people that have texted, because most buyers agents are texting, hey, are you guys offering compensation? And when they say that, I seriously go to my message and I copy and I paste this and I just put it in every one of them. Everybody's been okay with it. So
and that'll save you time too. I keep saying pick up the phone and have that conversation because you want to come off with kindness and make sure that they're motivated to show the home, send an offer, all the things. You don't want to lose anyone over just miscommunication. Another good option is to record a short video and then just save it. And then every time you get that question, you can send out that same video and tell them to call you if they have any questions.
That's great. That is a great idea right there. That's what you should do. Just a quick little 20-second video.
Yeah, because you're going to have that conversation a lot for a few months, I would say. Anybody else? Any other questions? Clear as mud?
Clear as mud.
It's gonna get easier. It really is. Okay, but if you still have questions, I am not a broker, obviously. This is a lot of tips and tricks that I picked up from talking to so many of the brokers and being in the broker room quite often, but they're very easy to talk with. So there's the broker hotline number. There's not a long wait. I will say there has been a little bit longer wait because everyone has these same questions, but for the most part, you can really get someone on the phone pretty quickly. Other than that, you can go to just your browser like Google Chrome and type in EXP World. It's going to pull up in a new tab. It used to be, EXP World used to be an app that you had to download on your computer. I don't know who's been in the EXP World lately, but it's so much easier. It's not an app that you have to download and do all this stuff. You just type in EXP World on, say, Google Chrome. Once you're there at the very top, you hit Go To, and then you select Broker Room, and then you select Texas, and then you can hop in there and ask them all kinds of questions. They're very helpful. You can ask broker questions. You can go to transactions and ask them questions about paperwork and SkySlope things, and then there's document compliance. So you have all the resources there that you may need. Also the email, you can email the broker. They're pretty quick with responses as well. So anything you need.
Thank you to Stormy. This is really helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, shameless plug.
I just want to add one more thing real quick, since you talk about the broker, the happy hour on Thursday from 4 to 6. You know, I have Brina coming out. She's our managing state broker. So go to Team Legacy Facebook page to see the location. And if you're in Houston, come out on Thursday 4 to 6 and hang out with us and hang out with the state broker and ask all the questions you need to ask.
Awesome. Yeah, they really get out in the community and do get-togethers if you need them. They did we had a broker come to the Cannon and answer a lot of questions, and it's just very helpful sometimes to have those in-person conversations. So that's awesome. I will wrap it up by saying I am a transaction coordinator at Elite Transaction Pros. I am adding on back-end help. So if all of this totally overwhelms you, and you want to leverage your business and just kind of get out there and do more face-to-face and grab more buyers and sellers, and you don't want to deal with the back end and the paperwork, you can hire me and my team, and we'll be happy to help you. So if anyone's interested, you can email me, you can call me anytime. I'm happy to go over our services, and yeah, we're here for you. I work with 20, I think I have 20 EXP agents that I work with right now. So always here to help. Okay, turn it back over to Sydney.
Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Stormy. Really appreciate a lot of information. And yeah, if anyone has any further question or wants to work with you, definitely reach out to Stormy. She's already helped me a lot, so she'll be able to help out all of you. But yeah, thank you again and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Bye.